I'm Tucker, and if you like pranks, think again as we go over what happens when pranks go totally wrong. From a woman being blindfolded and guided to the edge of a pool she believes is full depth, to a freshman seated near the rear exit of a packed school auditorium as two upperclassmen in the back row raise their phones. It was July 4th, 2016, when a 4th of July pool party in Malibu turned from celebration to catastrophe, claiming the life of a young woman whose trust in friends would prove fatal. Megan Holt, a 24-year-old graphic designer, was the kind of person who said yes to everything. Her adventurous spirit and infectious enthusiasm made her the life of every party, always willing to try the craziest dares or most outrageous challenges. She had been a competitive diver in high school, which gave her confidence around water that would tragically work against her that night. The party was hosted at a luxury home where guests were engaging in increasingly dangerous dares as the alcohol flowed freely. By midnight, several guests had jumped from the deck into the shallow end and started filming blind dares for social media, egging each other on as the dares got riskier. Megan had been drinking for hours, her judgment clouded by celebration and peer pressure. The host's brother had devised what he thought was the ultimate prank, a blindfolded trust dive that would give participants the scare of their lives. The elaborate setup involved partially draining the pool to around 3 or 4 feet of water and using underwater lighting to create the illusion of full depth. In daylight, the concrete bottom would have been easy to spot, but the combination of dim lighting, alcohol, and clever placement of colored LEDs made the pool appear deceptively deep. A few guests joked that the water seemed lower than usual, but no one questioned it once the lights went on. The host's brother had arranged the draining earlier in the day with a portable pump and turned on the lights only after dark, ensuring few guests noticed the lowered water level. Multiple party guests gathered around with phones ready to record what they expected would be a hilarious moment when Megan discovered she was diving into shallow water. They positioned her at what appeared to be the deep end, assuring her she was standing over 8 feet of water. Megan was blindfolded with a thick towel and spent several minutes psyching herself up for the dive. Her high school diving experience kicked in as she prepared for what she believed was a standard pool dive. The wet concrete deck provided no safety mats or warnings about the dangerous conditions below. When Megan finally launched herself forward in a perfect racing dive, her head and neck struck the concrete bottom with tremendous force. The impact immediately fractured her cervical vertebrae at the C5 to C6 level, causing instant quadriplegia, as her spinal cord was severely compressed and damaged. The sharp, shallow splash drew a few laughs. It sounded odd, but under the music and laughter, no one registered what it meant. The most horrifying aspect of this tragedy was that Megan remained fully conscious, but completely paralyzed from the neck down. Unable to lift her face out of even 2 feet of water, she began drowning while her friends continued laughing and cheering, thinking her lack of movement was part of an elaborate joke. For nearly a full minute, party guests filmed and celebrated what they believed was Megan playing along with the prank. Someone joked that she was holding her breath too long. Then the water clouded red. That was the moment the laughter stopped and the horrible reality became clear. By the time they pulled her from the pool, she had aspirated significant amounts of water and lost consciousness. Emergency responders arrived to find a young woman whose promising life had been cut short by a prank that ignored basic physics and human anatomy. Despite immediate CPR and advanced life support, Megan was pronounced dead from drowning secondary to catastrophic spinal cord injury. The homeowner and his brother faced criminal negligence charges and served jail time. The family's wrongful death lawsuit was settled, but no amount of money could bring back their adventurous daughter, whose trust had been so callously betrayed. Friends later admitted they had brushed off her hesitation to join the prank, assuming Megan, of all people, could handle anything. This tragedy sparked local safety campaigns and renewed calls for stricter pool safety regulations at private gatherings. It also fueled national conversations about the deadly consequences of viral prank culture. Megan's death serves as a permanent reminder that water and concrete don't care about your intentions, only physics matters. It was April 12th, 2015, at a downtown office building in Seattle, Washington. The overcast morning brought temperatures of 52 degrees Fahrenheit with light rain. The 15-story structure housed multiple businesses and maintained strict security protocols. 26-year-old Annika Lowe worked as a marketing coordinator on the 8th floor, and had been employed there for nearly 3 years. Medical records later revealed she had a documented history of panic disorder and took daily medication that could affect heart rhythm. Colleagues described her as diligent and detail-oriented, though she sometimes appeared anxious during stressful situations. Her co-worker in the same department had grown frustrated with monotonous office life and decided to create excitement through an elaborate prank. According to his confession to federal investigators, he believed calling in a fake bomb threat would result in a routine building evacuation, giving everyone an unexpected day off. His plan involved using an anonymous internet calling service. Investigators later described him as socially naive, with no real understanding of how seriously bomb threats are treated. During the mid-morning hours, building security received the threatening call claiming a bomb had been placed on the 8th floor with a 20-minute detonation timer. Emergency protocols were immediately activated throughout the facility. Security personnel began floor-by-floor evacuations, directing all occupants to use stairwells exclusively, while elevators were automatically disabled. Floor wardens quickly organized the evacuation process, guiding employees toward the emergency stairwells. The narrow staircases became crowded as hundreds of people from multiple floors began descending simultaneously. Witnesses later reported that Annika appeared visibly distressed upon hearing the bomb threat announcement. As Annika began descending the packed stairwell, several people noticed she was breathing heavily and had become noticeably pale. The combination of the emergency situation, crowded conditions, and her underlying anxiety disorder created physiological stress. Her heart rate likely increased dramatically in response to the perceived life-threatening situation. On the 5th floor landing, Annika suddenly collapsed among the crowd of evacuating employees. A fellow tenant who witnessed the collapse immediately retrieved an automated external defibrillator from a nearby emergency station. The AED detected an unstable rhythm and advised a shock. Hospital records later confirmed it was torsade de pointes. 2 electrical shocks were delivered by the AED, while other evacuees performed chest compressions. The evacuation continued around the medical emergency, as building protocol required clearing all floors before emergency responders could safely enter. First responders reached Annika after the affected floor was completely cleared, causing a brief but critical delay in advanced medical care. Despite continued resuscitation efforts and transport to the hospital, she could not be revived. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as sudden cardiac arrest resulting from a stress-induced malignant heart rhythm. Her anxiety medication could prolong electrical conduction in the heart, making her vulnerable to dangerous arrhythmias during extreme stress. The investigation traced the anonymous call through internet service records back to her co-worker, who faced federal charges for making false bomb threats resulting in death. The case demonstrated how pranks designed to create panic can have fatal consequences for individuals with underlying medical vulnerabilities. It was August 2, 2015, at a cliffside lookout in Sedona, Arizona. The weather was clear, and the visibility stretched for miles across the red rock formations. Weekend hikers moved along marked paths, stopping at narrow ledges that overlooked steep drops into the canyons below. The sandstone in this area was known for being brittle in some sections, and signs advised visitors to stay back from the edge and watch for loose gravel. Among the hiking groups was 31-year-old Carlos Peña, a warehouse assistant from Flagstaff who spent weekends on easy climbs and local trails. A co-worker invited him to join a small group that filmed simple prank videos for their social page. Their clips used battery-powered drills with no bits, pressed against rock to make a loud rattling sound and fake the illusion of a ledge being damaged. Carlos had seen a few of their videos but had never participated. During the hike, they explained the plan. He would stand near a dramatic overlook while another member pressed the spinning drill against the sandstone to stage a slip for the camera. The drill was harmless, but the sound could convince someone unfamiliar with the prank that the rock had weakened. They reached a narrow sandstone platform that extended about 3 to 4 feet beyond the main trail. The ledge sat slightly lower than the walking path, and the surface sloped outward toward the canyon. Several hikers had already stopped there earlier in the day to take pictures. leaving clear footprints and patches of disturbed gravel along the edge. A weathered metal sign was posted a few yards back, warning visitors that the rock formations in that area were prone to cracking and that the outer ledges had unstable surfaces. Despite this, the spot remained popular because the overhang created a clean drop behind anyone standing there, which made the background look dramatic in photos and videos. The group positioned itself on the flattest section. Carlos stepped closest to the edge because he was the tallest and would help frame the shot. Footage reviewed later showed him standing only a few inches from the drop, his boots near a thin scatter of loose gravel. Behind him, one of the pranksters held a small battery-powered hand drill. It was a simple model with an empty chamber that spun easily when the trigger was pressed. The prankster angled himself slightly to Carlos's left, so the sound would carry clearly without hitting him. In the recording, the drill suddenly revved. The motor whined at a high pitch, and the chuck rattled loudly when the prankster pressed it against the sandstone surface. The noise echoed against the rock wall behind them. According to witnesses, the sound was abrupt enough that someone unfamiliar with drilling noises might assume something had cracked. Carlos reacted instantly. He reflexively shifted backward at the sudden noise, but his right foot landed on a thin layer of loose gravel that slid immediately under his weight. Witnesses saw the stones slide under him, leaving nothing to grip. He threw his arms out, but the outward sloping sandstone behind him dropped away, and he went over the cliff within a second. Hikers on a lower outcrop heard the fall and saw dust rise from the impact area. Rangers later estimated the drop at roughly 70 to 90 feet. Two members of the group followed a worn path downward and reached him within minutes, but witnesses confirmed he showed no movement. The uneven terrain made it difficult to get close without slipping. Rangers arrived shortly after being notified by another hiker. Investigators later used the prank recording to determine where he had been standing, the angle of the drill, how close his boots were to the gravel, and the moment the loose stones shifted under him. The video provided a clear sequence that matched the physical evidence on the ledge and the measurements taken by the Rangers. Rangers documented the ledge, noting loose fragments and the thin gravel layer that had shifted beneath his boot. The fall distance and impact location were consistent with fatal injuries. The death was classified as accidental, with the prank identified as the direct trigger that caused the backward step. The group ended its prank page shortly afterward. Park officials reinforced warnings along the lookout and reminded visitors to avoid staged stunts near cliff edges, noting how quickly a controlled joke could become a real emergency. It was October 28th, 2015. The late afternoon in suburban Arlington, Virginia. Children darted along sidewalks in costumes, and the faint scent of wood smoke lingered from backyard fire pits. However, the calm of the neighborhood masked an invisible hazard. A small, crude setup on the road, meant as a prank. David Conde, 32, was a school bus driver known for his punctuality and meticulous attention to safety. He lived with his wife, Sarah, 29, a nurse at a nearby hospital. The couple was expecting their first child and were cautious in daily life, often double-checking locks, car seats, and schedules to ensure safety. David's work required constant vigilance, navigating city streets and managing distracted children. Sarah's nursing shifts were demanding, yet she maintained strict routines for health and exercise, often jogging before work to manage stress. Both were considered careful, responsible, and highly conscientious by friends and colleagues. Their personal life was equally structured. David maintained his vehicle meticulously, checking brakes, lights, and tires daily due to the nature of his job. Sarah preferred walking or cycling in well-lit areas, aware of neighborhood risks. On the evening of the incident, they were driving home from a late prenatal appointment, returning in their 2012 mid-size sedan along a narrow 25-mile-per-hour residential street lined with parked cars. Visibility was average, though the low sun cast long shadows across the asphalt. Their attentiveness, however, could not account for external, unpredictable hazards. Earlier, a group of neighborhood teenagers had placed a scarecrow in the road dressed in a Halloween costume as a prank. The figure was upright and positioned in the lane, intended to startle passing drivers. Witnesses later reported seeing multiple vehicles swerve suddenly to avoid the scarecrow, creating unpredictable patterns of movement. The pranksters did not consider the consequences of drivers reacting at moderate speed on a street with oncoming traffic. David and Sarah approached the street at a moderate speed of approximately 30 miles per hour, unaware of the obstruction ahead. As they neared, a passing car swerved sharply to avoid the scarecrow, crossing into the opposite lane. The sedan could not react in time. The front of the oncoming vehicle struck the Conde's car at approximately a 40 miles per hour combined impact, driving the sedan violently off course and crushing the passenger compartment. The vehicle rotated slightly, about 30 degrees, before coming to rest against a tree. Neighbors rushed into the street, and a nearby street surveillance camera recorded the collision sequence. Inside the car, the force of the impact caused immediate structural deformation. Both David and Sarah suffered catastrophic blunt force trauma. Ribs were shattered, skulls fractured, and internal bleeding occurred in multiple organs, including the liver, spleen, and major blood vessels. Sarah's seatbelt was positioned normally, but still allowed blunt force to her lower abdomen, resulting in the stillbirth of their unborn child. Witnesses described the car's crumpling and the sound of metal twisting against metal. Emergency services arrived within 7 minutes, performing rapid assessment, but both adults were pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner's report listed multi-system blunt force trauma as the cause of death, specifying fractures to the skull, ribs, and cervical vertebrae, along with internal hemorrhage in thoracic and abdominal organs. The fetus was stillborn due to direct blunt abdominal trauma sustained by Sarah, confirmed to be a result of the collision forces. Investigators determined that the collision resulted directly from the other vehicle swerving to avoid the scarecrow, which had been illegally and negligently placed on the roadway. After the incident, local authorities identified the pranksters through surveillance footage and eyewitness statements. They were charged with reckless endangerment and faced fines and community service. No jail time was served due to age and lack of prior offenses. The Conde's funeral was private, attended by family and close friends. It was June 25, 2016 in Tampa, Florida, during a crowded house party marking the start of summer. Music played, people drifted between rooms, and attention stayed outside where fireworks were being prepared. Inside the house, a separate joke unfolded, one that no one was watching closely enough to stop. One of the guests was Alex Moreno, 23 years old. He worked part-time at a sporting goods store and shared an apartment nearby with 2 roommates. Friends described him as outgoing and willing to go along with jokes, especially when alcohol was involved. He had no medical conditions and was considered healthy. That night, Alex had been drinking but was still alert and moving around the house, talking with guests. The home belonged to a friend who was moving out at the end of the month. Cardboard boxes and packed items lined the hallway, including a large hard-shell suitcase left open near the stairs. Earlier in the evening, someone joked about how big it was. Alex, laughing, climbed inside to prove he could fit. Several people gathered around, filming briefly on their phones. At first, the suitcase was left open. Alex curled his knees toward his chest, joking and calling out to people nearby. A friend reached down and pulled the zipper partway, stopping at Alex's waist. Someone else zipped it a little farther, still laughing. The zipper closed fully a few seconds later. At nearly the same moment, fireworks were lit outside. A group rushed toward the front yard, cheering and filming the sparks. Music volume increased. The house emptied quickly, leaving the hallway quiet. The suitcase remained upright against the wall. Inside the suitcase, Alex began shifting almost immediately. The hard shell restricted movement, forcing his knees toward his chest. Once fully zipped, airflow was limited to small gaps along the zipper and seams. The fabric lining dampened sound, muting any movement from inside. Video recorded outside during the fireworks later captured faint, irregular thumping coming from inside the house, barely audible beneath music and crowd noise. No one reacted. Most guests were focused on filming the display or talking in the yard. No one returned indoors for several minutes. As time passed, the confined space restricted chest expansion and ventilation. Carbon dioxide rapidly accumulated inside the suitcase. while heat and panic increased oxygen demand, making effective breathing progressively harder. According to the medical review, loss of coordination and strength would likely follow within minutes. Movements inside the suitcase slowed. At some point, the case tipped slightly onto its side, likely from internal shifting. After that, there were no further sounds. Nearly 40 minutes later, a guest went back inside to grab a drink and noticed the suitcase in the living room. Someone joked about Alex still being inside. The zipper was pulled open, but Alex did not respond. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes and attempted resuscitation on the living room floor. There were no signs of recovery. Alex was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner ruled the death as asphyxia from oxygen deprivation. There were no injuries, trauma, or toxic substances involved. Investigators reviewed phone videos and nearby security footage and classified the incident as a fatal prank caused by reckless behavior. No charges were filed. In the aftermath, the homeowner canceled the move-out party and cooperated fully with investigators. Local fire safety officials later cited the case in public advisories about the dangers of enclosed spaces and the speed at which oxygen loss can occur. The suitcase was logged as evidence and later destroyed. Friends removed party videos from social media within days. Clips of the fireworks remained online briefly before being taken down. It was March 15, 2017, when what started as an innocent birthday surprise at a Phoenix office building turned into a deadly nightmare that would forever change how we think about workplace pranks. Travis Coleman, a 28-year-old accountant, was known throughout his financial services company as the quiet, methodical type who preferred spreadsheets to small talk. His colleagues often joked that Travis treated every calculation like a life-or-death situation, never knowing how prophetic those words would become. What they didn't know was that Travis carried a dangerous secret. He suffered from hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a heart condition that made his heart muscle abnormally thick and prone to deadly rhythm disturbances. The prank wasn't meant to ignite anything. The 3 younger employees had modified store-bought novelty fireworks, the kind that flash and crackle without open flame, and rewired them to light up and pop without real combustion. They believed it would look dramatic but harmless, producing loud bangs and flashes through LEDs and audio playback. What they didn't realize was that even these low-voltage pyrotechnic effects produced intense noise and flashes that could trigger panic, and in Travis's case, a deadly cardiac shock. They'd smuggled in consumer-grade fireworks and modified novelty pyrotechnics with flashing LEDs, items that were never intended for indoor use and which violated building safety rules. They positioned security cameras throughout the break room on the 12th floor, expecting to capture Travis's hilarious reaction for their social media followers. Travis had mentioned several times that he hated surprise parties and loud noises due to his anxiety, but his co-workers dismissed this as typical antisocial behavior. They decorated the break room with balloons and streamers, setting the stage for what they thought would be harmless entertainment. When Travis was led into the break room that afternoon, 15 co-workers shouted surprise as he approached the seemingly innocent birthday cake. The moment he leaned forward to blow out the candles, the hidden device activated with multiple loud explosions, blinding flashes and small fireworks going off simultaneously. The extreme shock was too much for Travis's compromised heart. The sudden surge of adrenaline triggered ventricular fibrillation, causing his heart to quiver uselessly instead of pumping blood. Within seconds, his face turned blue as blood flow to his brain stopped completely. But here's where the tragedy became even more horrific. His co-workers thought he was playing along with the prank. For several critical minutes, they laughed and filmed his collapse, assuming his apparent distress was just an elaborate performance. Travis clutched his chest and collapsed, his breathing becoming irregular gasps as his brain was starved of oxygen. By the time someone realized something was genuinely wrong and called for help, precious minutes had already passed. Emergency responders arrived and immediately began CPR and defibrillation attempts. After 20 minutes of advanced cardiac life support, they managed to briefly restart his heart, but the prolonged lack of oxygen had caused severe brain damage. Travis's heart stopped again in the ambulance, and he was pronounced dead from sudden cardiac death due to ventricular fibrillation. The 3 pranksters were charged with involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to prison terms ranging from 2 to 4 years. The company faced millions in wrongful death lawsuits and implemented strict anti-harassment policies. OSHA investigators later cited the firm for unsafe handling of pyrotechnic materials within a workplace, noting multiple lapses in supervision and safety compliance. The break room where Travis died was permanently closed and converted into a memorial space. His family established a foundation promoting awareness of hidden heart conditions in young adults, hoping that Travis's death might prevent similar tragedies. This case serves as a chilling reminder that what seems like harmless fun can have deadly consequences when medical conditions and human psychology are ignored in the pursuit of viral entertainment. It was August 22, 2016, in Phoenix, Arizona, where afternoon temperatures reached 112 degrees Fahrenheit under relentless sun. Closed vehicles sitting in direct sunlight measured between 130 and 150 degrees inside, especially those with dark-colored trunk compartments that absorbed heat rapidly. 20-year-old Bastian Stone worked at an electronics retailer in a busy shopping mall and was known among coworkers for his playful nature and love of practical jokes. His colleagues often described him as someone who enjoyed surprising people with harmless scares. He also had a habit of checking his car trunk repeatedly, worried about potential break-ins. What his coworkers didn't know was that the trunk's internal release cable had recently begun sticking intermittently, something Bastian had noticed but had not yet repaired. His coworker, who managed inventory at the same store, decided to turn Bastian's trunk-checking habit into what he believed would be a harmless prank. He planned to hide inside the trunk and jump out when Bastian ended his shift, expecting the whole thing to last only 10 to 15 minutes. Previous playful jump-scare pranks among the team had gone smoothly, which made him think this one would be just as harmless. During the afternoon shift change, while Bastian remained inside helping customers, the co-worker used Bastian's habit of leaving his car unlocked during work hours, a practice multiple employees later confirmed. With the vehicle accessible, he climbed into the trunk of Bastian's dark-colored sedan parked in the employee section of the mall lot. The car had been sitting in full sun exposure for hours, and the trunk's temperature continued rising as the metal surfaces absorbed heat. Store records showed that a complicated customer issue extended Bastian's shift far longer than expected. Meanwhile, the trunk's interior reached dangerously high levels. As temperatures climbed, the coworker attempted to adjust his position inside the confined space. Forensic inspectors later determined that this movement likely worsened the sticking release cable, making it difficult or impossible to activate from inside. After roughly 40 minutes in the superheated compartment, he began showing signs of severe heat exhaustion. Rising heat overwhelmed his body's ability to regulate temperature. Early confusion, dizziness, and dehydration set in quickly, impairing his ability to recognize or use the emergency handle. By the time Bastian finally walked to his car and opened the trunk, the co-worker was semi-conscious, with hot, dry skin and shallow, rapid breathing. Witnesses saw Bastian immediately call for help and attempt to cool him. Emergency medical services arrived within minutes. Paramedics recorded a core body temperature above 105 degrees Fahrenheit and began aggressive cooling procedures. Despite rapid transport, ice pack cooling, and advanced life support efforts at the hospital, the prolonged exposure had already caused irreversible damage to multiple organ systems. He was pronounced dead less than an hour after being found. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as heat stroke resulting from confinement in an overheated vehicle compartment. Vehicle forensics confirmed that the trunk's release cable showed signs of intermittent mechanical sticking, consistent with a partial jam. Investigators concluded that the co-worker likely attempted to escape, but could not activate the compromised mechanism, with heat-induced confusion further limiting his ability to respond. The incident underscored how quickly enclosed vehicle spaces can become lethal during extreme heat, and how even simple pranks can turn fatal when mechanical failures and environmental conditions intersect. It was October 27, 2018, inside a seasonal Halloween warehouse in Atlanta, Georgia, USA. The store was busy preparing weekend displays, and employees moved props, boxes, and lighting equipment across the concrete floor, while themed music played over the speakers. 55-year-old Brian Lucas had worked at the warehouse for over a decade as a forklift operator, handling unloading and pallet storage. Co-workers said he startled easily, especially during Halloween setups, and his medical file noted mild hypertension. Despite this, the team often played small seasonal pranks, activating animatronics or hiding toy spiders. That week, a group planned a bigger joke using a lightweight foam coffin kept near the holiday display area. They selected Brian because he frequently helped move bulky props and was known to react strongly to surprises. The plan was simple. He would be asked to help lift the coffin while a co-worker hidden inside pushed the lid open and shouted. Another worker would assist on the opposite end to keep the prank controlled. No one involved expected any danger. They intended to record a quick reaction for a private group chat. On the afternoon of October 27th, security cameras showed Brian walking toward the display area after being told the coffin needed to be repositioned. The prop itself weighed under 40 pounds, made of molded foam with a hinged lid attached by plastic brackets. Decorations were stacked around the aisle, and two co-workers positioned themselves as planned, one at the far end ready to lift, and the other hidden inside, waiting for the signal. Footage showed Brian bending down and gripping his side of the coffin near the base. As he pulled upward, the lid shifted slightly, creating a gap. At that exact moment, the employee inside thrust the lid open and lunged forward in a sitting motion. Witnesses said he also shouted to maximize the scare. Brian reacted immediately. He jerked backward, his shoulders rising sharply as he lost balance. He took 2 uneven steps as his balance faltered, raised a hand toward his chest, and reached for a nearby shelving post but failed to grip it. Within seconds, he lost stability completely and collapsed onto the concrete floor. The co-worker who had jumped out stopped instantly, abandoning the prank. One called his name, while the other shouted toward the office for help. Emergency services were contacted at once. The first responders arrived shortly after and were guided through the storage racks to Brian's location. From the position of most employees standing nearby, it was clear that Brian was unresponsive as responders worked. They assessed his condition on the floor while staff were directed to step back toward the main aisle. Later that evening, officials confirmed that Brian Lucas died from a sudden cardiac arrhythmia triggered by acute stress from the scare, compounded by underlying hypertension. Investigators reviewed the security footage and interviewed the employees involved to document the exact sequence of the prank and the moment the collapse occurred. Following the incident, the warehouse discontinued all jump scare activities among staff and updated internal safety guidelines. Prosecutors declined to file charges, determining that the scare did not meet the legal standard for reckless endangerment. The 2 employees involved were suspended and later terminated for violating workplace conduct policies, while OSHA penalties were issued to the warehouse for failing to prevent unsafe pranks among staff. The foam coffin prop was removed from the planned display and marked as evidence during the review. It was May 21st, 2015 in the Philippines. The morning air in Camarines Norte, Bicol, was humid but calm, and the corridors of a local public high school carried the usual clatter of students moving between classes. Yet beneath the normal bustle, the stage was unknowingly set for a sudden fatal accident. Angelo Yasis, 16, was a high-achieving senior known for his studious approach to schoolwork and disciplined routines. He lived with his mother, who worked long hours as a seamstress, and he contributed financially through creating art projects for grade schoolers part-time. On the day of the incident, he was carrying 3 thick textbooks stacked in one arm while descending the stairwell. The concrete stairs in the main stairwell were worn and uneven in places, with a slight slope that made carrying a heavy load more physically demanding, especially if the surface was compromised. That morning, a group of classmates had poured a thin layer of soapy water over a loose tile at the top of the 3rd flight as a prank. Cell phone footage of one of the pranksters later revealed several students laughing quietly as they navigated around the slick spot. No staff members were present in the stairwell, and the tile's instability was unnoticed by faculty. Angelo, unaware of the hazard, approached the top of the flight while reviewing his schedule mentally. As he stepped onto the soaped tile, the sole of his shoe lost traction completely. The loose tile shifted slightly under his weight, further reducing grip, and he began sliding backward uncontrollably. The concrete stairwell, narrow with low railings, offered no opportunity to arrest his fall. He tumbled, rotating backward, striking his head against the edge of one step, then his upper back and shoulders on successive steps. Fellow students nearby froze initially, then ran toward him, but they were too late to prevent multiple impacts. The final motion sent him landing at the bottom of the stairwell. His body lay in a partially curled, awkward position, consistent with instinctive flexion during a fall. One student immediately ran to the office and called emergency services. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, performing CPR and stabilizing him for transport. Hospital staff confirmed severe, unsurvivable trauma before arrival, documenting multiple fractures and internal bleeding consistent with blunt force impacts over multiple surfaces. They declared him dead on transport. The coroner's report, summarized in accessible terms, listed catastrophic head injuries, dislocation of the cervical spine, and extensive internal bleeding in the brain and chest. The official cause of death was determined to be massive trauma resulting from a fall down concrete stairs. In the aftermath, the pranksters were disciplined by the school and required to perform community service. Angelo's mother held a small, solemn funeral, attended by family, friends, and classmates, mourning the loss of her only son. It was November 18, 2016, in Akron, Ohio, during the final hour of a slow afternoon shift at a small office supply warehouse. Orders had tapered off, supervisors were distracted with paperwork, and employees were passing time between cleanup tasks, an environment where attention slipped and jokes began to replace routine. Among the staff was Eric Dalton, 32 years old. He worked as an inventory clerk, responsible for checking incoming boxes, updating stock sheets, and labeling outgoing orders. Eric had been with the company for just under a year. He was known as reliable, quiet, and methodical, someone who followed procedures and rarely joined in on office humor. He usually carried a pen clipped to his shirt pocket and a small clipboard for counts, even when moving between aisles. The warehouse was a plain setup: concrete floors, metal shelving, rolling carts, and tight aisles between pallets. Safety rules focused on equipment, not behavior, and small pranks were common and largely ignored. Earlier that week, coworkers joked about Eric's habit of walking fast while reading inventory sheets. During a shift lull, two of them tied his shoelaces together while he was bent over, planning to undo them as soon as he noticed. Eric finished his count and straightened up, clipboard under one arm, pen still clipped near his chest. He took a step forward. CCTV footage from the aisle showed what happened next in real time. His feet caught instantly. With his shoes bound, his stride collapsed into a short, uncontrolled stumble. His upper body pitched forward. He did not have time to put his hands out. As he fell, the clipboard slipped free. His right shoulder struck first, twisting his body sideways. The pen, clipped high on his shirt near the collar and angled upward, was forced inward as his head pitched forward. The tip entered his left eye at an angle, penetrating the socket. His head struck the concrete floor a fraction of a second later. The impact was audible on the recording. The footage showed Eric's body come to rest face down, legs entangled, one arm trapped beneath him. He did not move afterward. Nearby activity in the aisle ceased, and the recording captured coworkers entering the frame and then stepping back. Emergency services were contacted shortly after. Paramedics arrived approximately 6 minutes later and were guided straight to the aisle. They rolled Eric onto his side and assessed him on the floor. Blood was visible around his face, and the pen was lodged deeply. He showed no response. Responders initiated life-saving measures, but the injury was catastrophic. Eric was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death a penetrating head injury. The pen entered through the left eye, causing immediate and catastrophic brain damage. The fall itself was contributory, but not fatal. Investigators reviewed CCTV footage and concluded that the tied shoelaces directly caused the loss of balance and fall. 2 co-workers were formally charged with involuntary manslaughter and later accepted plea agreements resulting in suspended sentences and probation. Following the incident, the company prohibited all pranks, updated safety policies to address behavioral risks, and incorporated the footage into internal safety training. It was June 18, 2016, when a Miami apartment building rooftop became the scene of a deadly stunt that would expose the fatal consequences of social media culture and misplaced trust in amateur safety equipment. Bethany Rhodes, a 26-year-old social media coordinator, lived and breathed superhero movies. Her apartment was filled with comic book memorabilia, and her Instagram feed constantly featured posts about overcoming fears and living life to the fullest. Her trusting nature and enthusiasm for new experiences made her the perfect target for what her 3 roommates believed would be the ultimate viral video opportunity. The roommates had convinced Bethany they could create an amazing superhero flying experience using what they claimed was professional stunt equipment. They planned to film her swinging between their 12-story apartment building and the adjacent 8-story parking garage, with the 18-foot gap seeming manageable with proper equipment. Bethany had no experience with stunt work, but her roommates assured her they had researched everything thoroughly. What Bethany didn't know was that her roommates had purchased a standard climbing harness and rope online, then anchored it to a decorative roof fixture never designed to support human weight. The metal ventilation cover they chose was held in place by standard screws driven into the roof decking, adequate for covering ventilation equipment, but completely inadequate for the dynamic forces created by a human body in motion. They'd accessed the rooftop through a maintenance hatch they'd found unlocked, and the decorative vent secured only by lightweight screws was never rated for dynamic human loads. The roommates had spent hours setting up their equipment and camera angles, convinced they were creating the next viral sensation. They fitted Bethany with the legitimate climbing harness and connected it to the climbing rope that was properly rated for her weight, but only when anchored to appropriate mounting points designed for such loads. Standing at the edge of the 12-story rooftop, Bethany felt excitement and nervousness as her roommates filmed what they expected would be a safe and spectacular swing to the parking garage. She trusted completely in their assurances about the safety preparations, never questioning the anchor point that would determine whether she lived or died. When Bethany jumped from the rooftop, the decorative anchor point immediately failed under her 140-pound dynamic load. The standard screws pulled straight out of the roof decking, sending her into a completely uncontrolled fall toward the concrete courtyard below. Bethany fell freely for 8 stories, approximately 96 feet, before striking the concrete courtyard at roughly 55 miles per hour. She impacted the ground feet first, with the tremendous force completely shattering both legs and her pelvis. The massive impact energy traveled upward through her body, fracturing her spine in multiple places and causing catastrophic internal injuries. Her femurs were driven upward into her torso, puncturing vital organs and causing massive internal bleeding. Death occurred within minutes from traumatic shock and internal hemorrhaging, though she briefly remained conscious after the impact. Witnesses in the courtyard immediately called emergency services after hearing the devastating impact. Emergency responders arrived to find a young woman whose dreams of viral fame had been crushed by the unforgiving laws of physics. All 3 roommates were charged with criminally negligent homicide and sentenced to prison terms ranging from 7 to 10 years. The building's management later faced multiple wrongful death lawsuits for failing to implement adequate rooftop safety barriers and access controls. The incident prompted Miami officials to require special activity permits for rooftop stunts and tighten rooftop access enforcement citywide. Bethany's family created a foundation promoting social media responsibility and educating young people about the dangers of viral stunt culture. This tragedy serves as a permanent reminder that physics doesn't care about your follower count. It was October 31st, 2017, in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Plano, Texas. The evening air was cool, and moisture from earlier dew left a slick sheen on roofs and outdoor surfaces across the area. 19-year-old Nora Quinn was spending Halloween night alone at her family's 2-story colonial home, while her parents attended a neighborhood gathering. A college freshman studying communications, Nora was known by friends as cautious and responsible, often preferring quiet evenings to large social events. The house sat on a peaceful cul-de-sac lined with mature oak trees that partially blocked the streetlights, creating uneven visibility across the property. Her 22-year-old brother worked in retail management and had a reputation for elaborate pranks among his friend group. That evening, he convinced 2 co-workers to help execute what they considered a harmless Halloween scare. The brother later told investigators that he never imagined Nora would think the intrusion was real. Using his spare key to the family home, the three young men entered through the back door while Nora was upstairs in her bedroom. The group moved through the darkened house carrying flashlights, deliberately opening drawers and cabinets to simulate the sounds of intruders searching for valuables. They tapped on windows from the inside and created footsteps in the hallway. According to police statements given later, the brother expected Nora would quickly realize it was a prank. Upstairs, Nora heard the unfamiliar sounds and saw moving lights through her bedroom door. Genuinely believing burglars had entered the house, she immediately called emergency services and barricaded herself in her bedroom closet. The recorded call captured her whispered reports of intruders moving through the house, along with audible sounds of doors opening and muffled voices. As the sounds seemed to move closer to the stairway, Nora made the decision to escape through her second-story bedroom window. She climbed onto the composite shingle roof, which had become slippery from the evening's moisture accumulation. Evidence at the scene suggested she had attempted to reach a low-hanging oak branch, approximately 6 feet from the roof's edge. Police responding to her emergency call later documented wet sock prints near the windowsill and visible water beading on the roof surface. As Nora attempted to reach the tree branch, her right foot lost traction on the damp shingles. She slid toward the edge and fell approximately 18 feet, landing directly on the concrete driveway below. Patrol officers arrived roughly 4 minutes after the initial call and discovered Nora unconscious on the driveway. Dispatch logs showed a patrol unit was already passing through the neighborhood for Halloween safety checks, which shortened the response time. Inside the house, they found her brother and his friends removing their masks, having realized something had gone wrong when they heard sirens approaching. Paramedics pronounced Nora dead at the scene. The medical examiner determined that she had suffered a basilar skull fracture and severe brain trauma, consistent with a high-impact fall onto concrete from a significant height. The investigation included analysis of the emergency call recording, crime scene measurements, and police body cam footage that documented the wet roofing conditions and the open bedroom window. Her brother faced charges of reckless endangerment and involuntary manslaughter. The case highlighted the unpredictable consequences of pranks designed to frighten, particularly when the target believes they are facing genuine danger and responds with survival instincts. It was April 14, 2018 in Houston, Texas. Inside a small apartment complex where several young tenants filmed casual food challenges for their shared social page. That afternoon, they prepared another recording in the kitchen, setting up a tripod and arranging plates of chicken wings on the counter. 23-year-old Jacob Ellis lived with 2 roommates in the unit. He worked as a delivery driver and often joined their simple food challenge videos. Jacob had mild asthma, which his friends knew about but rarely saw as a concern since he kept it controlled with an inhaler. He usually avoided hot sauces, a running joke in their recordings. That night's video was meant to compare mild wings with a slightly hotter batch. While Jacob stepped into the kitchen, his roommates quietly swapped his plate with wings coated in concentrated pepper extract, a novelty sauce far stronger than normal. They later said they expected only an exaggerated reaction for the camera and did not consider how the extreme heat could affect his asthma. When the recording started, Jacob sat at the table and reached for the first wing without hesitation. The footage showed him taking several bites, chewing normally at first. After swallowing, he paused and coughed once, as if surprised by the sudden heat. Within moments, the cough returned, sharper and more frequent. He leaned closer to the table, bracing himself with one hand as the coughing grew intense. According to the others in the room, they initially assumed it was all part of the video. They were used to exaggerated reactions during food challenges, and nothing about the first few seconds seemed alarming. But the coughing didn't stop. Jacob pushed his chair backward so fast that it toppled to the floor. The camera caught him standing abruptly, gripping the edge of the table for support. He tried to move toward the kitchen sink, but the force of the coughs made it difficult for him to stay balanced. He pressed a hand against his chest and turned toward the hallway, attempting to walk toward the apartment exit where he hoped to get fresh air. Security footage showed Jacob stumbling out the front door, gripping the metal railing as he coughed in rapid, uneven bursts. His posture tightened before he dropped to his knees, still trying to inhale. A roommate followed with a phone and another appeared holding his inhaler, but Jacob's coughing weakened quickly. He leaned against the railing until his legs gave out, and he collapsed on the concrete landing. Responders arrived and took over, clearing the walkway as residents were moved back inside. Officials later confirmed that Jacob Ellis died from acute bronchospasm leading to respiratory failure, triggered by the concentrated pepper extract, and worsened by his underlying asthma. Investigators reviewed the prank footage and lobby camera, examined the extract's warnings, and interviewed the roommates. The case was classified as a fatal prank involving misuse of concentrated pepper extract during a staged food challenge. The apartment complex later issued reminders about safe filming practices, and the social page was taken offline. Jacob's videos were removed from public access. It was August 12, 2016. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the arid terrain near Broken Hill, New South Wales. An old, disused silver mine sat at the edge of the property, its entrance partially collapsed and shored up by rusting beams. To a casual observer, the area seemed quiet, but within the tunnels and rubble, a single misstep was about to turn curiosity into catastrophe. Emily Lohr, 21, was a geology student at a major Australian university, specializing in mineralogy and structural geology. She spent weekends visiting historical mines and quarries, photographing stratigraphic layers and abandoned industrial equipment for both study and personal interest. Emily was methodical and careful, with a deep understanding of rock stability, structural decay, and the hazards of derelict mining sites. Friends described her as meticulous, curious, and adventurous, but always conscious of personal safety and environmental risks. She often carried a field pack containing a full hard hat helmet with chin strap, headlamp with backup batteries, gloves, first aid supplies, and sturdy lace-up boots designed for uneven terrain, and she wore long pants and sleeves to minimize scrapes and cuts. Beyond academics, Emily documented her explorations for a small university club and occasionally collaborated with local heritage societies to record and map abandoned mines. She had received small grants for equipment, including high-lumen headlamps and portable gas detectors, and was aware of the dangers posed by unstable floors, loose rock, and hidden vertical shafts. Her preparation and gear typically mitigated risks, but the environment remained inherently hazardous. Narrow tunnels, unpredictable rubble, rust flakes, and corroded metal beams made even minor missteps potentially fatal. On the day of the incident, Emily joined 3 friends near the mine for a short exploration. However, they decided to play a prank by pretending to leave her alone in the main tunnel while extinguishing their headlamps, recording audio for later humor, and not providing a rope or handhold along the tunnel edge. The group ignored several warning signs, posted danger, unstable mine notices, crumbling supports, loose stones scattered along the floor, and uneven flooring. No formal risk assessment or rope line was established, and cell service was non-existent in the area, reducing options for emergency communication. The prank elevated danger far beyond normal exploration conditions. Emily entered the darkened tunnel, relying solely on the dim ambient light from outside. Her foot caught an uneven stone, and she stumbled forward, arms flailing to regain balance. The absence of lighting eliminated any visual cues about holes or debris in her path. She slipped on loose gravel, and her momentum carried her toward a concealed vertical shaft, hidden beneath a partially collapsed floor section. The shaft was approximately 10 feet deep, with rusted rebar protruding irregularly from the walls, remnants of an old support structure. Her body orientation during the fall caused her chest and upper torso to land on one set of protruding bars, while her lower torso and hips struck other rebar as she tumbled, producing multiple simultaneous injuries. Her friends immediately realized the prank had gone too far. They heard a sudden, sharp thud followed by Emily's scream. Their recorded laughter ceased, replaced by urgent shouts. One friend leaned over the edge but could not safely reach her. Another ran to the entrance to call emergency services. The rescuers brought a collapsible ladder and secured ropes before reaching her to prevent further collapse or injury. Within 12 minutes, local search and rescue teams arrived. navigating unstable floors and low visibility to reach her. By the time they accessed the shaft, Emily had succumbed to severe trauma and was pronounced dead at the scene. The post-mortem report showed puncture wounds from rebar to the chest and abdomen, multiple rib and pelvic fractures, punctured lungs, and extensive internal hemorrhage across thoracic and abdominal cavities. The primary cause of death was impalement on rusted rebar, with catastrophic internal injuries occurring instantly, making survival impossible. Following the incident, the university's geology department implemented stricter safety protocols for field trips, including mandatory risk assessments, buddy systems with constant visual contact, formal approval for entry into abandoned structures, and the requirement of safety ropes or secured harnesses when exploring unknown tunnels. Emily's friends faced legal consequences for gross negligence, resulting in fines, probation, and mandatory community service related to safety education. It was October 14th, 2017, in Port Charlotte, Florida, during a crowded house party marking the start of the Halloween season. Music spilled into the street as guests moved between the living room, backyard, and driveway. Fireworks popped near the curb, drawing most people outside while smaller pranks continued inside without much attention. Lena Cruz was 21 years old, a college student studying hospitality management. She worked part-time at a cafe and spent weekends with the same group of friends she'd known since high school. They often filmed short prank clips for social media. Simple scares, costumes, and reactions meant to be funny rather than elaborate. With Halloween weekend approaching, the group had been talking about ideas that might get more attention. That night, someone suggested a roadside scare. Lena volunteered to wear a long white dress and stand briefly in the road so passing drivers would see a ghost-like figure in their headlights. One friend would film from the shoulder. The plan was for Lena to step out, wait a second, then move back as the car slowed. They assumed drivers would brake when they saw her, and that the scare would last only a moment. What they failed to account for was the road itself. The street curved slightly, had no paved shoulder, and was bordered by a shallow drainage ditch on one side and a fixed concrete culvert marker on the other. Traffic was light, but cars moved quickly along the unlit connector road, where drivers routinely exceeded posted limits late at night when the street appeared empty. Lena changed behind a parked motorcycle, pulling on a long white dress and letting her hair hang loose. A phone was set a few yards back, aimed toward the curve in the road. Headlights appeared in the distance, growing brighter as a car approached its speed. On video, Lena steps off the pavement, lifting her arms slightly as the dress catches the light. The car does not slow down. The headlights jerk sideways as the driver swerves. The front corner of the vehicle strikes her almost instantly, throwing her onto the road as the car veers into a concrete post and grinds to a stop. Audio on the recording shifts abruptly as the camera jolts and the person filming moves toward the roadway. Lena lies motionless near the impact point, her dress darkening against the asphalt. The driver stumbles out of the car, shouting for help as the engine clicks and goes quiet. Lena's friends place the emergency call immediately, giving the location and reporting a pedestrian strike. The phone continues recording as the group backs away from the road. Responders arrive within minutes and confirm Lena shows no signs of life. The driver is treated at the scene for minor injuries. The medical examiner ruled Lena's death the result of multiple blunt force injuries sustained on impact. Investigators determined the driver swerved to avoid a sudden obstruction on an unlit road and had less than 2 seconds to react. Phone footage confirmed Lena entered the lane moments before the collision, and the driver was cleared of wrongdoing. Investigators also determined that Lena had volunteered for the prank and was not directed or physically restrained by others. No charges were filed against her friends. In the days that followed, local authorities issued warnings urging residents to avoid roadside pranks and costumes near traffic. The video circulated briefly online before being removed by the platform for violating safety policies. The stretch of road remained unchanged, though warning signs were later added nearby. It was November 3, 2017, when a seemingly harmless prank at a Denver Community College chemistry lab created a toxic cloud that would claim the life of a dedicated student whose commitment to safety became his downfall. Cale Morton, a 19-year-old chemistry student and lab assistant, was the kind of person who read safety manuals for fun. His serious approach to laboratory protocols had earned him the position of student safety monitor, making him responsible for ensuring proper handling of all chemicals. Cale suffered from mild asthma, a condition he managed easily with a daily inhaler, never imagining it would make him vulnerable to a deadly chemical reaction. 3 classmates had grown tired of Cale's constant safety reminders and decided to teach him a lesson through what they thought was a harmless prank. Their plan was simple: switch the labels on cleaning supply bottles to confuse him during his evening inventory work. They swapped ammonia labels onto bleach containers and vice versa, expecting to watch Cale panic when he discovered the apparent mislabeling. The pranksters had no understanding of basic chemistry. They didn't realize that mixing bleach and ammonia creates chlorine gas, a deadly chemical weapon used in World War I that can kill within minutes in confined spaces. Their ignorance turned the small storage room into a sealed pocket of toxic air. That evening, Cale was conducting a routine inventory of cleaning supplies in the small chemical preparation room. As the dedicated safety monitor, he took his responsibilities seriously, ensuring every chemical was properly stored according to strict protocols. When he discovered what appeared to be improperly labeled containers, he immediately began following standard procedures to correct the situation. Following proper safety protocols, Cale began transferring liquids to appropriate containers based on what he believed were the correct labels. When he poured what he thought was ammonia into a container he believed held bleach, the 2 solutions mixed and immediately began producing chlorine gas. The toxic yellow-green cloud filled the small preparation room within seconds. Crucially, the prep room's ventilation had been shut off for overnight maintenance, leaving the small space poorly ventilated and allowing the gas to concentrate dangerously fast. Cale's first breath of the gas caused immediate chemical burns to his respiratory tract and triggered a severe asthma attack. The combination of toxic exposure and acute bronchospasm caused his airways to constrict, while the gas continued burning his lung tissue. Within a minute, Cale became dizzy and disoriented from oxygen deprivation. His asthma inhaler was completely ineffective against the chemical-induced bronchospasm. He began coughing up blood-tinged foam as his lungs filled with fluid from the chemical burns. Cale attempted to reach the emergency exit, but collapsed after taking several steps. His body was shutting down as the toxic gas destroyed his respiratory system from the inside. The very dedication to safety that defined his character had led him directly into a death trap created by classmates who thought chemistry was a joke. A night security guard making routine rounds discovered Cale and immediately called emergency services while dragging him from the contaminated room. Paramedics arrived and provided immediate respiratory support, but the damage was already catastrophic. Cale was pronounced dead from acute chemical pneumonia and respiratory failure, complicated by his pre-existing asthma condition. The 3 students responsible were charged with criminally negligent homicide and received prison sentences ranging from 3 to 6 years. It was September 7th, 2017, in Chicago, Illinois, where steady rain fell throughout the evening as temperatures held at 58 degrees Fahrenheit. The 3rd-floor apartment overlooked a busy street where regular traffic noise provided constant background sound. 24-year-old Una Bell worked as a graphic designer and had been living with her boyfriend for 3 years in what friends described as a stable relationship. Medical records would later reveal she had been managing depression and anxiety with prescribed medication, though recent dosage adjustments had been made. Colleagues knew her as creative and sensitive, someone who took personal relationships seriously. Investigation revealed that her closest friend had grown concerned about what she perceived as complacency in Una's relationship. According to the friend's statement to police, she believed that some manufactured drama might reinvigorate the couple's connection and devised a scheme to create fake evidence of infidelity. Phone records also showed she had been drinking earlier, which may have impaired her judgment. During the early evening hours, the friend sent carefully constructed digital evidence to Una's phone, including manipulated screenshots of supposed conversations between her boyfriend and an unknown woman. She had also prepared a photograph of his car parked at a hotel, though this image had actually been taken weeks earlier during an unrelated business trip. Phone metadata later recovered by investigators showed that Una repeatedly viewed and forwarded these materials to another friend, accompanied by increasingly distressed text messages expressing shock and betrayal. The digital evidence appeared convincing enough to trigger genuine emotional distress in someone already vulnerable due to her mental health condition. Over approximately 45 minutes, Una's emotional state deteriorated rapidly as she processed what she believed was proof of her boyfriend's unfaithfulness. During this period, she made several phone calls to her boyfriend, though he was unable to immediately explain the fabricated evidence since he was unaware of its false nature. As her distress intensified, Una consumed a significant quantity of her prescribed benzodiazepine medication along with alcohol. The combination of these substances, particularly in someone already taking psychiatric medications, created a dangerous situation involving central nervous system depression. Toxicology experts noted that her recent medication adjustment made her more vulnerable to unpredictable reactions. Her boyfriend, concerned by her increasingly incoherent phone calls, drove immediately to the apartment. Upon arriving, he discovered Una unresponsive on the living room floor, with shallow, irregular breathing patterns consistent with respiratory depression from the drug and alcohol combination. Emergency medical services responded within minutes of his call for help. Paramedics documented severely depressed respiratory function and probable aspiration of stomach contents. Sedation from the drug-alcohol combination likely suppressed her gag reflex, increasing the risk of inhaling stomach contents. Standard reversal agents were considered but not administered due to the risk of seizures in mixed substance ingestions. Despite aggressive airway management and supportive care during transport and at the hospital, Una's condition continued to deteriorate. She progressed to complete respiratory failure and was pronounced dead after resuscitation efforts proved unsuccessful. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as acute combined benzodiazepine and alcohol toxicity with aspiration complications. The subsequent investigation revealed the fabricated nature of the infidelity evidence through phone data analysis. The friend who created the false materials faced criminal charges related to actions that contributed to the death. It was September 3, 2016, along a quiet rural road outside Chiang Mai, Thailand. The area was mostly farmland, with long stretches of open fields and only the occasional vehicle passing through. A narrow dirt pull-off sat beside the two-lane road, commonly used by field workers to rest before continuing their shifts. A small produce shed stood nearby, where a few seasonal workers stored tools and equipment for the surrounding farms. That was where the incident began. 24-year-old Kittisak Arun, known as Kit, worked part-time as a helper at the shed, organizing crates and assisting farmers loading small trucks. Co-workers described him as easygoing and willing to do whatever task was needed. During breaks, Kit and 3 friends often filmed short prank clips for their social page, mostly harmless jokes involving simple props from the shed, tipped hats, fake insects, or playful jumps meant to make viewers laugh. That afternoon, the group decided to film another reaction-based prank. Someone suggested loosening a rung on the old aluminum ladder stored along the wall. The idea was to make it wobble slightly when Kit stepped on it, capturing his startled reaction on video. They had pulled similar pranks before, never removing screws entirely, only tapping a tool against a rung or tilting the ladder slightly to get a harmless laugh. This time, however, one friend removed 2 screws holding a lower rung, expecting it to sag just enough to startle him. They didn't consider that the ladder was often used beside tall, unstable stacks of produce crates. When Kit returned from moving a sack of fertilizer, the camera was already recording from a corner shelf. A co-worker asked him to retrieve a box of ties stored on the higher shelf above the stacked crates. Security footage from the shed showed Kit positioning the ladder beside the crates and placing his weight on the first step. It held. He climbed to the second rung, reached upward, and shifted his weight again. As soon as he stepped on the loosened rung, it tilted downward under his foot. The sudden drop caused him to jerk backward, instinctively tightening his grip on the side rails. That shift pulled the ladder off balance, and because it stood so close to the stacked produce crates, the legs slid sideways. The entire structure tipped. The footage captured Kit falling from a height of roughly 6.5 feet. As the ladder toppled, his back struck the sharp corner of a metal pallet positioned beside the crates. One crate collapsed beside him, spilling produce across the floor. Workers nearby turned immediately at the sound of metal hitting concrete. Kit lay motionless as his friends rushed over, realizing too late that the prank had gone far beyond a simple joke. Someone ran toward the road to flag help from a passing vehicle, while another attempted to keep Kit still. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, but the injuries were severe. The medical examiner later confirmed that he suffered blunt force trauma to the chest, resulting in rapid internal bleeding. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Police interviewed the workers and reviewed the shed's footage. Investigators noted that the removed screws directly contributed to the ladder's instability. The prank was deemed negligent, not intentional harm. The co-worker who loosened the rung was terminated, and the shed's operators reinforced safety rules, banning all pranks on equipment. It was July 9, 2017 in Freiburg, Germany. The local cycling community was preparing for a small neighborhood race, but underneath the calm, an accident in motion had already been introduced. Lucas Meyer, 21, was a dedicated cyclist and a member of a cycling club. He spent most of his free time training on local roads, often starting before dawn to fit sessions around his part-time job at a bike shop. Lucas was saving money to upgrade to a custom racing bike. He wore standard protective gear, padded shorts, gloves, and a certified competitive cycling helmet meeting European safety standards. But he relied on proper bike maintenance and attention to road conditions to stay safe. His bike, a mid-range aluminum frame weighing roughly 18 pounds, was in excellent condition under normal circumstances. The course that day included a steep downhill stretch with a particularly tight right-hand turn flanked by an old lamppost, concrete curbs, and uneven cobblestones. Even with full braking capacity, cyclists needed precise control to navigate it safely at race speeds. Earlier that morning, Lucas's older cousin, joking in poor judgment, had loosened the brake cables on Lucas's bike. The cousin later admitted he meant it as a harmless scare, intending to embarrass Lucas for boasting the night before about taking the downhill turn without heavy braking and assuming Lucas would notice the slack during his warm-up. The tampering was subtle, only a slight slack, undetectable without detailed inspection. Under light brake pressure, the levers felt normal, but the brakes would fail under the high force application required for sharp downhill cornering. But Lucas didn't notice the adjustment. He mounted his bike with the usual pre-race routine, performing standard brake tests that felt normal under light pressure, unaware that their effectiveness would fail under the higher forces of the descent. As the race began, Lucas approached the downhill stretch in the lead pack, pushing speed but maintaining control. As he neared the sharp right-hand corner, he applied his brakes fully, expecting the usual deceleration. The brake levers pulled without sufficient resistance, and the bike failed to slow adequately under maximum applied force. Lucas instinctively shifted weight backward and attempted to swerve, but the turn's narrowness and the cobblestone surface left no margin for error. Witnesses saw the bike slide uncontrollably across the corner. Lucas was thrown forward over the handlebars in a near-perfect projection, striking the lamppost head first. The lamppost was positioned just inches beyond the optimal racing line, leaving almost no clearance. The impact cracked his helmet, but it did not absorb enough force to prevent fatal trauma. His body collided with the concrete base and partially onto the curb before sliding into the street. Fellow racers rushed to the scene immediately, and one bystander called emergency services. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, performing advanced life support, but Lucas was pronounced dead at the scene. The post-mortem report listed severe brain contusions, skull fractures, and multiple facial bone fractures. The cause of death was determined to be instantaneous brain trauma and severe head injury from high-speed impact. Afterwards, Lucas's family pursued legal action against the cousin. The court determined gross negligence and reckless endangerment. The cousin received a suspended sentence and was required to complete community service and pay restitution to the Meyer family. It was June 22, 2016, in a quiet residential area on the outskirts of Chiang Mai, Thailand. Night had settled in, and the neighborhood was calm, broken only by insects and distant traffic. An active rail line ran behind the homes, ungated, familiar, and often ignored by residents. Narin Chayasit had just turned 24. He worked as a junior drafting assistant for a small construction firm in central Thailand, and still lived with his parents a few streets from his childhood home. Co-workers described him as reliable and quiet, someone who showed up early and left on time. Friends said he didn't enjoy pranks and usually avoided surprises, but he trusted the people closest to him. When his birthday came up, he tried to downplay it. The group decided to celebrate anyway. According to later police interviews, the plan was meant to feel dramatic but harmless. A few friends suggested a surprise party at a nearby house. Before revealing it, they wanted to scare him briefly, something they thought would make the reveal more memorable. The idea was to blindfold Nareen, bring him near the railway line at the edge of their neighborhood, let him hear a train approaching, then remove the blindfold and explain the joke. Several friends said they had crossed that section of track many times and believed trains followed a predictable schedule. One friend set a phone on a concrete ledge beside the tracks to record the moment. Another held a phone from the side. Witnesses later said Naren was told they were stopping briefly on the way to dinner. When they reached the rail corridor, someone tied a cloth over his eyes. He laughed and asked where they were. One friend told him to relax and just stand still. They guided him forward. According to the video reviewed later, his feet were positioned between the rails. The blindfold stayed in place. Nareen asked again what was happening. A friend standing behind him said it would make sense in a second. At first, the area was quiet. Then a distant train horn sounded, low and muffled. Several friends later said they felt a vibration underfoot and assumed they still had time. As the seconds passed, the horn sounded again, louder and closer. One witness later said that was the moment he realized the train was much nearer than they expected. On the phone recording, a single headlight appeared around the curve, cutting through the trees along the track. At that point, Naren pulled his blindfold away and saw the train. According to witness statements, he froze immediately. His shoulders tensed, and his arms stiffened at his sides. He did not step back or turn away. The recording captured someone urging him to move, assuming he would react once he understood what was happening. Instead, he stood in place, eyes fixed down the track. One friend later told police he thought Nareen was still processing the scare until the horn became continuous and the vibration underfoot intensified. Another reached out toward him, calling his name, but stopped when the train entered full view at speed, leaving no time to intervene. The train engineer later reported seeing a figure on the tracks and immediately sounding the horn while applying emergency brakes. Railway data showed the train was traveling about 35 miles per hour. The distance was too short. The impact occurred seconds later. Naren was struck and thrown clear of the tracks. The fixed phone jolted and tipped. The handheld camera dropped, capturing gravel, shoes moving frantically, and shouting. Neighbors nearby heard the horn and ran toward the crossing. Friends yelled for someone to call emergency services. The train came to a stop several hundred feet down the line. Responders arrived within minutes, but Naren's injuries were severe. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as multiple traumatic injuries consistent with a train collision. There were no signs of alcohol or drugs. The report noted no defensive injuries or evidence of attempted escape, consistent with a freeze response under extreme fear. Police reviewed both phone recordings in full and interviewed each friend separately. Several admitted they assumed Nareen would move on his own. Charges were filed for reckless endangerment, resulting in death against two individuals involved in positioning him on the tracks. Both later received suspended sentences, citing negligence rather than intent. The birthday decorations stayed in their boxes, In the months that followed, the informal crossing was fenced and warning signs were installed. Railway officials later referenced the case in safety briefings, emphasizing that trains cannot stop quickly and that moments of hesitation near active tracks can be fatal. It was August 12, 2018, when a trust-building exercise on an Austin highway overpass became a deadly lesson in the physics of human deceleration, claiming the life of a young woman whose faith in her friends would prove tragically misplaced. Jolene Parks, a 22-year-old restaurant server and psychology student, was known for her unwavering trust in others and her determination to overcome personal fears. Despite her terror of heights, she had recently committed to facing her phobias head-on, posting about her journey of self-improvement on social media. Her trusting nature and desire for personal growth made her the perfect target for what her college friends believed would be an unforgettable bonding experience. The four friends had convinced Jolene that they had arranged a legitimate bungee jumping experience from an 85-foot highway overpass that had once been used by licensed bungee companies during special events. What Jolene didn't know was that her friends had substituted professional bungee equipment with a 60-foot static climbing rope, planning to give her the scare of her life by stopping her fall much shorter than expected. The friends had purchased legitimate climbing harnesses online and spent considerable effort making their setup appear professional. To disguise the substitution, they covered the static rope with bright elastic tubing and colorful sleeves, so it visually resembled an elastic bungee line. They assured Jolene that everything was properly inspected and certified, exploiting her trust and her limited knowledge of extreme sports equipment. The climbing rope they used was rated for static loads, but had zero elasticity, a crucial difference that would prove fatal. Standing on the bridge railing 85 feet above the busy highway, Jolene spent nearly 15 minutes working up the courage to jump. Her friends encouraged her, filming what they expected would be a hilarious moment when she realized the fall was much shorter than anticipated. They had no understanding of the deadly physics involved when a human body traveling at high speed is suddenly stopped by an inelastic rope. When Jolene finally jumped, trusting completely in her friends' assurances about safety, she fell freely for exactly 60 feet before the static climbing rope reached its limit. At that moment, she was traveling at approximately 43 miles per hour when the rope brought her to an instantaneous stop. The sudden deceleration created forces far beyond what the human body can withstand. While her harness held perfectly and the rope performed exactly as designed, the extreme deceleration forces tore through her internal organs like a wrecking ball. Her aorta, the body's main artery, ruptured instantly under the tremendous stress, causing massive internal bleeding. Jolene remained conscious for about 30 seconds, hanging 25 feet above the highway, but was already in severe shock from the internal trauma. Passing motorists immediately called for help after witnessing the fall, but the damage was already done. Emergency responders used specialized rescue equipment to reach her position, but despite their best efforts, Jolene was pronounced dead from traumatic aortic rupture and internal hemorrhaging. The very trust that defined her personality had been weaponized against her by friends who confused physics with pranks. All four friends were charged with involuntary manslaughter and received prison sentences ranging from 8 to 12 years. The incident prompted local officials to tighten enforcement of existing extreme sports regulations and permanently close the bridge to public access. Jolene's parents became advocates for adventure sports safety, ensuring that their daughter's death would serve as a warning about the deadly difference between professional equipment and amateur assumptions. This tragedy stands as a permanent reminder that trust is sacred, physics is unforgiving, and the combination of the two can be lethal. It was March 15, 2018, during spring break at a beach house rental in Gulf Shores, Alabama. 8 college students had gathered for their annual week-long vacation, with temperatures reaching a warm 78 degrees Fahrenheit, under clear skies and moderate humidity levels. 23-year-old Ramona Davies was a pre-medical student known for her disciplined lifestyle and meticulous health habits. Friends described her as someone who maintained strict dietary routines and exercised daily, often declining junk food in favor of protein smoothies and morning runs along the beach. She had a tendency toward dehydration during physical activity. Medical notes from her campus clinic later confirmed she had previously shown borderline electrolyte levels after long workouts. Her roommate worked in campus food services and had developed a mischievous streak over their years of friendship. The roommate later admitted to investigators that she believed Ramona had become too rigid in her habits and decided to play what she considered a harmless prank by secretly adding nearly a full bottle of magnesium citrate solution to Ramona's morning protein smoothie. According to her statement to police, her intention was to cause embarrassing digestive issues during their planned beach volleyball activities. The morning began routinely with the group preparing for outdoor games on the sand. Ramona consumed her usual breakfast smoothie before joining the volleyball match, playing energetically for over an hour in the direct sunlight and coastal wind. The physical exertion caused significant sweating, which would later prove medically relevant. Within a few hours of consuming the adulterated drink, Ramona began experiencing severe abdominal cramping. This progressed to profuse diarrhea and repeated vomiting episodes as her body reacted to the large quantity of osmotic laxative. Initially, she attempted to rehydrate using plain water, but her condition continued deteriorating. By mid-afternoon, witnesses observed Ramona becoming increasingly disoriented and complaining of heart palpitations. Her friends, unaware of the prank, assumed she was experiencing normal digestive upset and did not seek medical attention. They later told police they assumed she had food poisoning from the previous night's takeout. The combination of the laxative effects, previous dehydration from exercise, and inability to retain fluids created a dangerous physiological situation. Emergency medical services were eventually called when Ramona collapsed in the beach house bathroom. Paramedics found her with rapid, irregular pulse patterns. Their cardiac monitoring equipment recorded ventricular tachycardia that quickly degenerated despite initial treatment attempts. During transport and emergency department care, medical staff initiated intravenous fluid replacement and advanced cardiac life support protocols. Laboratory tests revealed severe electrolyte imbalances, particularly low potassium levels, along with metabolic acidosis consistent with massive fluid loss. Despite aggressive resuscitation efforts, including multiple medications and electrical cardioversion, Ramona suffered cardiac arrest and could not be revived. The medical examiner concluded her death was consistent with severe dehydration and electrolyte collapse, triggered by the large dose of osmotic laxative. The investigation revealed the roommate's involvement when she admitted to adding magnesium citrate to the smoothie. Physical evidence included text messages and an empty laxative bottle found in the kitchen trash. Criminal charges were filed against the roommate for actions contributing to the death. The case demonstrated how seemingly minor pranks involving substances can have fatal consequences when combined with environmental factors. It was May 8, 2016 in Cebu City, Philippines. The heat inside a small neighborhood furniture shop lingered even in the late morning, and workers moved between sanding tables, stacks of lumber, and partially finished cabinets. The shop was undergoing renovations, leaving scraps of wood, loose boards, and exposed metal brackets scattered around the floor. A single ceiling fan rotated slowly, barely pushing the warm air. Among the employees was 38-year-old Marlon Rivera, a general laborer who handled sanding, lifting finished panels, and organizing supplies. He lived a short walk from the shop and usually changed into his outdoor slippers during break times to cool off his feet. Co-workers said the group often played small pranks, usually harmless, like hiding tools or taping labels to each other's backs. That morning, one of the workers decided to escalate the joke. While Marlon worked in the finishing area, a co-worker picked up his outdoor slippers and hammered a short nail upward through the rubber sole. Only the very tip protruded inside, angled just enough to create a sharp jab when stepped on. According to the prankster's later statement, he expected nothing more than a startled yell or a quick hop, something the group had joked about doing for weeks. He did not consider how the shop's renovation hazards might interact with the prank. The work zone behind Marlon was especially cluttered that week. Renovation crews had opened a narrow trench to run wiring, covering part of it with a loose sheet of plywood to reduce dust. The board sat unevenly on the edges of the cutout, shifting when stepped on. Nearby, metal brackets removed from an old shelving unit were stacked on the floor. One bracket had slid off earlier that morning and ended up leaning at an angle with one corner pointing upward. Workers noticed it but left it where it was, planning to clean the area later. Around noon, Marlon stepped away from his sanding station for a short break. CCTV footage showed him walking toward the corner where he always kept his slippers. He put on the left one first, then slid his right foot into the sabotage slipper. The moment he shifted his weight, he reacted. The nail punctured the skin near his heel, causing him to jerk backward in reflex. The sudden jolt sent his left foot searching for balance. Instead, it landed on the loose plywood sheet behind him. The sheet, about 4 feet by 2 feet, had been laid as a temporary cover over a wiring trench and was resting unevenly on the cutout's edges. When his weight pressed onto its near side, the board pivoted and flipped upward, collapsing his stance instantly and throwing him straight backward. He fell onto a metal bracket that had tipped earlier that morning. Its corner was lodged upright at roughly a 30-degree angle, positioned just beyond the plywood's edge. CCTV footage captured the impact clearly. Marlon's lower back struck the exposed corner with full force, the bracket shifting sideways from the blow before settling flat. Several workers turned at the sound, a sharp, heavy impact followed by the sudden stillness of his body. He lay motionless beside the overturned board, the plywood cracked from the flip, and the bracket partially buried under him. Co-workers rushed over, pulling debris away and calling for assistance as others stepped back, realizing he was not responding. Witnesses later told investigators that he never regained movement from the moment he hit the floor. Emergency responders assessed him where he fell and transported him out of the shop, but the injuries were already catastrophic. The medical examiner later confirmed severe internal hemorrhage caused by concentrated blunt force trauma to the lower back, matching the bracket's position beneath him. The nail puncture that triggered his reflexive step was minor, but it set off the precise chain of events that led to the fatal fall. It was March 18, 2017, late afternoon in Rio de Janeiro's complex urban sprawl. On the 4th floor of a worn apartment building, a small lapse in judgment intersected with unforgiving height and concrete. Matheus Ribeiro, 24, was a small-time content creator known for documenting social issues in his community. He had a modest following on social media and was committed to shedding light on the daily struggles in his neighborhood, from inadequate sanitation to local crime patterns. Matheus balanced his creative work with a part-time job at a local internet cafe, and he was careful to maintain a low profile while navigating the challenges of life in a densely populated urban environment. Friends described him as politically aware, intelligent, and deliberate, but prone to anxiety in high-pressure situations. Matheus's environment was inherently hazardous. His apartment complex had narrow balconies with low railings approximately 36 inches high, stairwells without adequate lighting, and uneven flooring prone to crumbling in places. The wrought iron fencing below the balconies was designed to deter trespassers, but it also created a lethal hazard in case of a fall. Matheus had navigated these spaces safely many times before, relying on caution, but the precarious layout and high-density neighborhood meant even minor miscalculations could have severe consequences. That evening, several acquaintances forced entry into Matheus's apartment as part of a planned prank they called the Influencer's Ambush. After pushing in the door, they began igniting small firecrackers inside the entryway and living area, producing sharp explosions, smoke, and flashes of light in the confined space as if a gang raid was occurring. The prank was intended to capture his startled reaction for online sharing, but no one considered the risks of panic in a small apartment with direct access to a balcony. Startled by the sudden blasts at close range and the intrusion into his home, Matheus reacted reflexively. Disoriented and attempting to escape what he perceived as immediate danger, he moved backward toward the balcony. In the chaos, he misjudged the distance to the railing and stepped into open space. He fell forward over the low balcony barrier, arms extended instinctively, and dropped approximately 40 feet to the street below. Witnesses later described hearing the firecrackers followed by a single, heavy impact. He landed directly on the wrought iron fence below, the spikes piercing his torso. The spikes entered laterally at the chest, just beside the sternum, and through the abdomen below the right rib cage, puncturing the lungs and major blood vessels. Blood pooled immediately around the points of contact. Neighbors ran toward the scene, some screaming, some attempting to stabilize his body. But the severity of the injuries was evident. One neighbor called emergency services, who arrived within 12 minutes, navigating the narrow alley. Paramedics assessed the injuries and confirmed that Matthias had already succumbed to the trauma. The coroner's report listed penetrating trauma to the chest and abdomen, ruptured lungs, and major blood vessel damage. The cause of death was immediate massive internal injury from impalement on the metal fence. After the incident, Matthias's family removed his online content to protect his privacy and mitigate further distress. Authorities pursued legal action against the friends responsible for the prank, resulting in manslaughter charges for gross negligence due to reckless endangerment. It was January 12, 2018, in Quezon City, Philippines, just before noon, inside a small apartment kitchen. The space was tight and ordinary, appliances humming as usual. A phone sat propped on the counter, recording continuously, capturing what was meant to be a harmless moment as it unfolded without pause. Paulo Reyes was 34 years old. He worked as an office clerk for a logistics company, spending long days handling paperwork and inventory reports. At home, he preferred simple routines, quick meals, short videos, and quiet time before heading back out. He and his wife occasionally filmed light-hearted prank clips in their kitchen. Nothing elaborate, just everyday moments meant to entertain friends and private chats. None of their videos involved stunts or planning. The phone was usually set down, recording continuously. That morning, Paulo stood near the counter, peeling a banana. He leaned slightly forward, resting his weight on one foot, scrolling briefly on his phone between bites. His wife stood a few feet away, holding her own phone pointed toward him. The camera angle captured his upper body, the counter, and part of the tiled floor. There was no warning, no setup visible in the frame. As Paulo raised the banana toward his mouth, his wife stepped closer and pushed his head forward in a sudden motion. The push was quick and forceful enough to interrupt his movement mid-bite. The banana entered his mouth deeper than intended and lodged immediately. The phone recorded the moment his body stiffened. Paulo staggered back half a step. His hands flew to his throat. The banana blocked his airway, preventing him from breathing or speaking. The camera audio picked up harsh coughing sounds that quickly turned silent and strained. He bent forward at the waist, then straightened again, trying to draw air that would not come. The phone kept recording as laughter dropped away. Paulo's coughing weakened. He braced against the counter, unable to draw air. His face flushed, his chest strained, and then his knees gave out. He slid down and collapsed onto the kitchen floor as the phone was set down nearby. The footage shows brief twitching as his body struggled, then stillness. His wife shouted for help and tried to clear his airway, but the timestamps show the movement slowed and became minimal within the next minute. A neighbor contacted emergency services after hearing shouting. Dispatch logs show the call at 11:46 a.m. Paramedics arrived within minutes and attempted airway support on the kitchen floor, but Paulo showed no response and was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as asphyxia caused by a complete airway blockage. The banana became lodged deep in the airway, triggering a reflex closure and preventing effective breathing. There were no injuries or medical conditions that contributed. Police reviewed the phone footage, classified the death as accidental, and secured the video as evidence without filing charges. In the weeks that followed, local health agencies cited the case in advisories about choking risks and food-related pranks. It was October 31, 2015, when a Halloween prank at a Seattle office complex turned a routine maintenance check into a deadly nightmare that would expose the fatal consequences of workplace pranks gone wrong. Randy Tucker, a 35-year-old building maintenance supervisor, was the kind of man who took safety seriously. After 15 years working in high-rise buildings, he had developed an almost obsessive attention to detail that had prevented countless accidents. His methodical approach to elevator inspections had earned him commendations from building management, but it also made him the perfect target for what two security guards thought would be a harmless Halloween scare. Randy had one weakness that few people knew about. He suffered from mild claustrophobia. Years of working in confined spaces like elevator shafts had taught him to manage his fear. But the anxiety was always lurking beneath his professional exterior. The confined space of an elevator car, especially when something went wrong, could trigger intense panic responses. The security guards had spent weeks planning their elaborate Halloween prank. They rigged elevator car number 7 with hidden speakers and planned to trigger terrifying sounds of cables snapping, grinding metal, and emergency alarms when Randy was inside performing routine maintenance checks. They hid small, battery-powered speakers above the elevator's removable ceiling panel and triggered the sound effects remotely from the security desk, a crude setup that left no obvious physical tampering visible to maintenance. They timed the prank during routine morning testing hours, when elevator noises and alarms wouldn't draw attention from other staff. They thought it would be hilarious to watch the usually calm maintenance supervisor jump out of his skin. That Halloween morning, Randy was scheduled to inspect elevators throughout the 40-story building. His usual partner had called in sick, leaving him to work alone, a violation of safety protocols that would prove fatal. When Randy entered elevator 7 on the 23rd floor to check the mechanical systems, he had no idea he was walking into a carefully orchestrated trap. The security guards activated their prank, filling the confined space with extremely loud sounds of catastrophic mechanical failure and emergency alarms. The effect on Randy was immediate and devastating. His claustrophobia was triggered instantly by the combination of confined space and terrifying sounds. What started as manageable anxiety exploded into full-blown panic as his mind convinced him the elevator was actually failing. In his panicked state, Randy frantically pressed the emergency stop button and tried to force open the elevator doors. His extreme panic response caused severe hyperventilation, leading to respiratory alkalosis that made him dizzy and disoriented. While attempting to escape what he believed was a deadly situation, Randy slipped on his own sweat and fell backward, striking his head hard against the metal control panel. The impact caused a basilar skull fracture and immediate subdural hematoma. As blood began pooling inside his brain, Randy lost consciousness within minutes, but his brain continued to swell as intracranial pressure increased. The elevator remained stopped between floors, and the prank sounds continued for several more minutes before the security guards realized something had gone terribly wrong. By the time building maintenance accessed the elevator and found Randy unconscious, critical time had passed. Emergency responders arrived to find a man whose dedication to safety had been turned against him by colleagues who thought fear was funny. Randy was pronounced dead from severe traumatic brain injury and increased intracranial pressure. The two security guards were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to prison terms. The building management company faced fines and wrongful death claims. Randy's widow established a scholarship fund for elevator technician training, ensuring that his commitment to safety would live on. His death prompted renewed attention to elevator maintenance safety and stricter oversight within the industry. It was June 3, 2019, at a construction site in Denver, Colorado. The clear evening maintained comfortable temperatures around 71 degrees Fahrenheit, with excellent visibility as daylight gradually faded. The active apartment construction project featured a 12-foot deep utility excavation surrounded by standard orange safety fencing. 31-year-old Tobias Fox served as a site supervisor and was known throughout the construction industry for his meticulous attention to safety protocols. Co-workers respected his thoroughness during daily inspections and his insistence on proper protective equipment usage. He had developed a reputation for catching safety violations that others might overlook. The project foreman, who had worked under Tobias for several months, had grown tired of what he perceived as excessive safety scrutiny. He decided to play what he considered a harmless practical joke by temporarily removing a 6-foot section of protective fencing around the excavation. According to his statement to investigators, his intention was to watch Tobias discover the apparent safety violation during his routine walkthrough. Workers had temporarily removed several safety caps earlier for alignment work and had not yet replaced them. Co-workers later told investigators that the foreman frequently joked about Tobias's strictness and underestimated the danger. As evening approached, Tobias began his customary final inspection of the construction site. This daily routine involved systematically checking various work areas, scaffolding connections, and safety installations before securing the site for the night. He carried a standard flashlight to examine areas where natural lighting had become insufficient. The excavation area had been properly marked and fenced throughout the day with barriers, warning signs, and reflective tape. However, the removed fencing section created an unmarked gap in the safety perimeter that was not immediately visible in the diminishing light conditions. While examining overhead scaffolding work near the excavation, Tobias focused his attention upward and began walking backward to get a better viewing angle of the structural connections. The foreman, positioned approximately 30 feet away, witnessed Tobias approaching the unprotected opening, but realized too late that his co-worker was unaware of the missing barrier. Tobias stepped directly into the gap and fell the full 12 feet into the excavation. The bottom of the trench contained exposed steel reinforcement bars and concrete debris from ongoing utility installation work. Workers had temporarily removed several safety caps earlier for alignment work and had not yet replaced them. During his fall, he struck multiple pieces of uncapped rebar that had been left protruding from the excavation walls. The foreman immediately called emergency services and climbed down into the trench to provide assistance. He found Tobias conscious but severely injured, with obvious signs of internal trauma from the steel reinforcement bars. Emergency responders arrived and required specialized equipment to safely extract him from the confined space. During transport to the hospital, medical personnel noted signs of internal bleeding and initiated trauma protocols. Despite surgical intervention and blood transfusion efforts, Tobias succumbed to his injuries from multiple penetrating wounds that had damaged vital organs. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as hemorrhagic shock resulting from internal bleeding caused by penetrating trauma from steel reinforcement materials. The investigation documented the missing safety fencing through scene photographs and witness statements from the foreman, who admitted to removing the barriers. Criminal charges were filed against the foreman for reckless endangerment resulting in death. It was February 10, 2017, inside an automotive workshop in Detroit, Michigan. The morning had been routine, with mechanics moving between lifts, compressors running in the background, and workers taking staggered lunches while the shop stayed partially open. 29-year-old Tyrell Mason had been hired only 3 weeks earlier as a tire technician. He worked part-time at the shop while taking night classes in diesel mechanics. Co-workers described him as quiet, but easygoing, someone who tried to blend in with the crew. The workshop had a history of rough pranks during downtime, mostly harmless blasts of compressed air across the room or tapping someone's shoulder with a hose from several feet away. Tyrell had joked about it earlier in the week, but never handled the high-pressure hoses himself. The shop's compressed air system was designed for clearing metal shavings from machinery and blowing debris out of wheel rims. According to inventory logs, the industrial compressor produced air pressure far higher than handheld hobby units, enough force to clean equipment, but also enough to cause internal injury if misused. OSHA later noted that this level of compressed air can penetrate clothing and enter the body through vulnerable areas, causing severe internal injury. Around lunchtime, several employees remained inside while others stepped out to eat. Tyrell stayed behind to retrieve a tool he had forgotten on a rolling cart near the alignment bay. CCTV footage showed him leaning forward slightly as he reached for it, creating a small gap between the hem of his shirt and the waistband of his coveralls. At that moment, a co-worker walked toward him, holding an air hose that had been left connected to the compressor. Others on the floor later told investigators they assumed he planned to give Tyrell a playful burst of air from a distance, something that, while unsafe, had become a common joke in the shop. But instead of spraying him from a few feet away, the co-worker moved in close, pressed the nozzle directly against the fabric of Tyrell's lower back, and squeezed the trigger. The security footage captured the action clearly. Witnesses nearby said the hose produced a sharp, concentrated blast, much louder and stronger than the brief low-pressure spurts usually used during their pranks. Because the nozzle was pressed directly against him, the high-pressure air forced its way through the clothing into the lower body, a mechanism documented in industrial air injection injuries. Workers nearby reported a brief strained sound as his body tensed and he dropped to his knees almost immediately. He clutched his abdomen and then rolled onto his side. The co-worker who held the hose stepped back immediately, realizing the reaction was not what he expected. For a moment, nearby workers hesitated, thinking it was still part of the prank. But when Tyrell didn't respond and his breathing became shallow, someone immediately called for help. A senior technician contacted 911, while another stayed beside him to keep him still. According to later statements, Tyrell became unresponsive within moments. Paramedics from the local Michigan EMS unit arrived within minutes and were directed through the service bays to the tool area. Employees moved aside as responders began a rapid assessment, checking airway, breathing, and circulation before attempting stabilization. According to the official report, the high-pressure air had caused severe internal injury and rapid organ damage. Despite immediate intervention, Tyrell showed no signs of recovery and was pronounced dead at the scene. Detroit police forwarded the case to prosecutors for review, evaluating whether the co-worker's actions met the standard for reckless endangerment or involuntary manslaughter. After examining the footage and statements, prosecutors declined to file criminal charges, concluding that the act was a negligent workplace prank rather than intentional harm. The co-worker was terminated from employment, and OSHA penalties were directed at the shop for failing to prevent unsafe behavior. It was September 14th, 2016. The morning sun filtered weakly through the monsoon haze over a primary school in Pune, India. Recess was in full swing, but beneath the ordinary noise, a small, unnoticed setup had been placed that would turn a simple playtime into a tragedy. Rohan Iyer, 10, was a shy, introverted boy who found comfort in drawing and sketching during breaks rather than joining the more boisterous games. He lived with his mother and grandmother. Rohan had a gentle temperament, avoided confrontation, and often endured teasing from classmates without complaint. Teachers noted his intelligence and patience, though they also observed he struggled to assert himself socially. The playground in their school had concrete pathways, metal swing sets, low railings around the sandpit, and a small raised curb approximately 6 inches high. While generally safe, its hard surfaces and rigid equipment meant falls or collisions could result in serious injury. Rohan's daily recess routines involved sketching near the swings while observing others play, maintaining distance from rougher activities. That morning, a small group of classmates placed a realistic rubber snake near the swings in an attempt to scare Rohan. The snake's design was detailed, with painted scales, a flexible body, and coiled posture. Rohan approached the swings, focused on his sketch pad, when his gaze caught the snake. The sudden visual triggered an immediate, involuntary startled response. He jumped backward with full force, attempting to distance himself from the perceived danger. His foot landed on the slightly wet concrete and slid backward, carrying him off the raised 6-inch curb and toward a metal swing post. His neck struck the post at an awkward angle, impacting the back and side of his cervical spine. The playground attendant and nearby students observed the collision in real time. Rohan collapsed immediately, motionless with his drawing materials scattered around him. Fellow students screamed and ran to alert the attendant, who called emergency services. Responders arrived 8 minutes later, performing emergency stabilization. But Rohan never regained consciousness. The physical evidence at the scene, the position of his body, impact marks on the swing post, and the scattered backpack, corroborated the eyewitness accounts. The coroner's report recorded fractured cervical vertebrae, spinal cord transection, and compressive and rotational trauma to the neck, consistent with a fall from a slightly elevated surface. The cause of death was determined to be a broken neck causing immediate paralysis and fatal spinal injury. After the incident, Rohan's parents pursued action against the children involved, and school administrators faced scrutiny over playground supervision. Community response centered on outrage over bullying and the casual cruelty that led to the fatal incident. It was April 17, 2019, in Toledo, Ohio, during a mandatory spring assembly at a public high school. Nearly the entire student body filled the auditorium for testing announcements. Seats and aisles were packed, exits crowded, and staff focused on schedules. It appeared routine, but the space left little room for error. Evan Brooks was 14 years old, a freshman who had transferred earlier that year. He was smaller than most of the students around him and still learning how to navigate the school's layout. Evan was quiet, kept to a small group of friends, and usually chose seats near exits, so he could leave quickly when assemblies ended. That afternoon, he sat near the rear auditorium doors that opened directly into a concrete stairwell leading down to the main hallway. The school had held assemblies like this many times before. The building was older, with narrow stairwells designed decades earlier, before current crowd flow standards were common. Fire alarms were positioned near exits, and staff relied on students following instructions during drills. What administrators did not know was that two upperclassmen seated near the back had planned a prank. They intended to pull the fire alarm, film the reaction on a phone, and post the chaos online. They assumed teachers would stop the movement quickly, as they had during past drills. As the final announcements were being read, a phone camera in the back row began recording. The view showed rows of students standing, bags at their feet, and the rear exit doors only a few steps away. Seconds later, the fire alarm sounded. The sharp, continuous tone cut through the auditorium, louder than the speakers. Students reacted immediately. The phone footage captured heads turning, chairs scraping, and bodies pushing toward the nearest exits. Shouting replaced conversation. The rear doors swung open, and the flow of students poured into the stairwell. Hallway CCTV captured what happened next. The stairwell filled almost instantly, far beyond its intended capacity. Students moved downward shoulder to shoulder, backpacks pressed tight. Near the top of the stairs, Evan stepped forward with the crowd. His foot caught on the edge of a step as someone behind him pushed. He stumbled, then fell forward onto the concrete. The surge did not stop. Students behind him, unable to see what happened, tripped over his body. Others were forced forward by the pressure from above. Evan was pushed sideways into the metal railing lining the stairwell. CCTV showed the railing flexing as bodies pressed against it. The phone video captured the sound of shoes slipping, students yelling to stop, and metal creaking under strain. Within seconds, Evan was pinned. His chest was compressed against the railing as the crowd continued moving downward. Those closest tried to pull back, but the force from behind made it impossible. The railing bent further, trapping him in place. The phone footage showed arms reaching, hands slipping, and faces panicked as the situation spiraled beyond control. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics arrived shortly after and worked in the stairwell, clearing students away. When Evan was pulled free and assessed on the floor, he showed no signs of breathing. The medical examiner ruled Evan's death as compressive asphyxia. Sustained crowd pressure crushed his chest, preventing normal breathing. There were no major external injuries. Death resulted from a lack of oxygen during the surge. Review of phone video and hallway CCTV traced the event from the alarm pull to the stairwell overload. The student responsible was charged in juvenile court with involuntary manslaughter. The school later altered assembly procedures, redesigned stairwell flow, and updated fire alarm protocols using the footage as a safety example.